When you hear the word revolution, what comes to mind? Probably a massive, world-changing event, right? But for the people who first lived through them, the idea, well, it was something else entirely. So let's dive in and explore what revolution really meant. So let's set the scene. Between about 1775 and 1848, the whole world was just crackling with this new energy. I mean, for centuries, you had kings and queens holding all the power, but suddenly, ordinary folks from the Americas to Europe were starting to look up and ask a really dangerous question. Why them? They were demanding more freedom, a real say in how their own lives were run. But what's really wild is that the word revolution itself had its own revolution. Originally, it was an astronomy term. Seriously, it just described the predictable, circular path of planets orbiting the sun, always returning to where they started. But during this whole era, the meaning just completely flipped on its head. And you know what? This pancake analogy is actually perfect. Revolution didn't mean going back to the beginning anymore. It now meant a radical, irreversible break from everything that came before. It's that sudden, dramatic shift that turns society upside down. Because once you flip that pancake, things are never going to be the same again. So, right? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What on earth pushed people to risk literally everything for a shot at a new world? Let's get into the ingredients that made these massive, world-altering changes possible. Okay, so first thing we've got to get straight is that revolution wasn't this one-size-fits-all deal. Nope. There were different kinds, each one aiming to change a totally different part of the world. So you can kind of think of these upheavals as having three main flavors. You had political revolutions, like in France, which were all about who gets to be in charge. Then you had social revolutions, like the incredible Haitian Revolution, which went way deeper, changing the very fabric of society as enslaved people fought for and won their freedom. And then, of course, you've got economic revolutions, like the Industrial Revolution, which just completely transformed how everything was made and sold. And here's the kicker. These things were often all tangled up. An economic crisis could absolutely spark demands for political change. But even then, people were split on just how far to take things. On one side, you had these folks who wanted a total revolution. Their goal was to just wipe the slate completely clean. New government, new rules for society, a whole new culture. A total system reset. But then you had the other camp, the ones arguing for a more limited revolution. They didn't want to burn the whole thing down. Their goal was to reform the system they had. Change the government, fix the really unfair laws, but keep the core of their society together. And that argument, reset versus reform, that was at the heart of everything. So what does it take? What's the recipe that pushes a whole society to the brink, to the point where they're ready to flip that pancake? It's almost never just one thing. There's usually this common recipe, a combination of pressures that just build and build until something has to break. Well, it usually boils down to these four key ingredients. First, you need a deep, widespread sense that things are just unfair, that the rules are rigged for the rich and powerful. Second, you need powerful new ideas that give people a vision of a better, fairer world. Third, you've got severe money troubles where ordinary people just can't afford to live. And finally, a lack of basic freedom, where people feel trapped, silenced, and powerless. And listen, this wasn't just some abstract economic theory. Take money troubles. We're not talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about the fact that you might not be able to buy bread for your family because the king spent all the tax money on a ridiculously fancy palace. That kind of injustice is personal, and it makes people furious. And here's something that's absolutely critical to understand. It wasn't just about what people were against. It was also about what they were for. These new ideas coming out of the Enlightenment, ideas about equality and liberty and basic human rights, they gave people more than just anger. They gave them a blueprint for that better world they were hoping to build. Okay, so these revolutions happen, but what comes next? They didn't just end when the smoke cleared. No way. They shattered the old world order and created a totally new reality. They left behind massive, lasting consequences that, believe it or not, we're still living with today. And the aftermath was just staggering. I mean, think about it. Entire new countries, like the United States, were born. Across Europe, monarchies that had lasted for centuries were toppled, replaced by governments where citizens could actually vote. Rights that we just take for granted now, like free speech, were fought for and won. The world was fundamentally, permanently reshaped. And you have to remember, this wasn't just about big maps and new laws.
It changed real people's lives in very real ways. The Industrial Revolution, for instance, meant that a young guy like Thomas might see his entire life's path change overnight. The centuries-old rhythm of life on the farm was gone, replaced by the tick-tock of the factory clock, a whole new way of living, working, and being.
So, when you boil it all down, the Age of Revolutions was so much more than just a list of dates and battles. It was a global fight for the very ideas of fairness and freedom. It was a powerful declaration that ordinary people have a right to shape their own destiny. And that declaration, that spirit, it still echoes in movements for change all over the world today. Which, leaves us with a pretty powerful question for today. The people of that era reshaped their world based on the challenges and the big ideas of their time. So, when we look at our world now, with all of its unique pressures and its own powerful new ideas, what will be the forces that shape our future? And what will our revolution look like?